Fescarma agus Fáilte. Good afternoon and welcome to the Rebellious Truth Lecture Recital 2025. This is a series of lecture recitals presented by Celtic and Scottish Studies at the University of Edinburgh and Edinburgh Tradfest. And I'm Dr. Laurie Watson. It's my honour to curate and host the event. The purpose of this Rebellious Truth lecture recital is really to foreground the experiences and knowledge of practitioners involved in the traditional arts and to relate that to societal concerns. In 2021, our theme was ecological. In 2022, we discussed gender inequality. In 2023, the focus was on mental health and the traditional arts. And last year was a retrospective on 70 years in folk music in Scotland. This year, our speaker is Gaelic singer, broadcaster and teacher Joy Dunlop. Gaelic language is integral to the traditional arts of Scotland, shaping our melodies, themes, beliefs, rhythms, dances, shaping our community. In recent decades, significant strides have been made in Gaelic language regeneration and expansion. The 2022 census showed that we have around 58,000 speakers and around 130,000 with some Gaelic language skill, and this is a considerable increase on the previous census. There has been resistance, often fueled by a level of ignorance, misunderstanding, and of course multiple divisions that exist in our society. And among other things, we can probably still feel the heat of the debate around road signs. Joy Dunlop will share her experience as a learner, initially through song and song competition, and her experience includes an internal resistance as well as external resistance, perhaps a product of the safeguarding from within the Gaeldom. Before the main presentation, we have a special opening set from piper, multi-instrumentalist and composer Fraser Fifield, who is our current University of Edinburgh traditional artist in residence. Fraser Fifield is a multi-instrumentalist composer performing on low whistle, saxophone and bagpipes. His distinctive instrumental voice draws influence from many sources. Scottish folk music is identifiably present, but also jazz, Indian music and Balkan and more. Since the mid-90s, Fraser has worked with many artists from the Scottish folk music scene, including Old Blind Dogs, Salsa Celtica, Capper Cayley, Karen Matheson, and then from further afield with Zakir Hussain, Afro-Celt Sound System, Balkanopolis and Nordanians. In 2014, his low whistle featured on Montenegro's Eurovision song entry, which I'm sure our speaker tonight will be very pleased about, and followed in 2015. This was followed by an award from Hands Up for Trad for innovation in Scottish traditional music. And I think Fraser is one of those artists that really spans an understanding of the roots of form and style in traditional music in Scotland, and then this drive to innovate and explore other sounds and new ways of expressing the music. His Celtic Connections commission, Secret Histories, was performed in the opening concert by a 70-strong Grit Orchestra in 2020. And since 2022, Fraser has been engaged with different aspects of work for Celtic and Scottish Studies, as well as his own work, including producing 3 new albums and a range of collaborations across and beyond the university. And this has included new interpretations of melodies from the Eliza Ross manuscript held in the School of Scottish Studies archives, which we regard as one of our most valuable resources for traditional arts in Scotland. So please welcome Fraser Fifield.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Laurie. It's great to be here. I'll have to really update that biog at some point. It's a curiously potted history. But, nice to be here to play some music for you before turning the stage over to Joy. I'm going to begin on the small pipes. Quite a traditional programme of music I've got for you in store, I think. I'm certainly going to begin that way with 4 reels. The first 2 are are song melodies which I've learnt from Karen Matheson, her singing. I don't have a title for the first one. The second one is generally without a title. It's known as Cape Breton Song. And I'll go into two reels from the aforementioned Eliza Ross collection, which is indeed a bit of a treasure trove. And these are called Macpherson's Rant and Elegant Donald is Coming. Thank you very much. I tore a bit out of the Sunday newspaper to write my set list because it's terrible when people use phones, which I've done in the past, and I said never again. I can barely read what I've written. So the next item is for the last wee while I'm currently still working on it. There's this music which is known as the Inchcolm Antiphonor. It's the oldest written down music, I believe, in Scotland, dating from the mid-1300s, around about then, written in praise of St. Columba. So it's a vocal music, thinking of how to make instrumental versions. So I'll play you a phrase or two and improvise a little and see what happens. That's how they did it, note for note. I'd like to continue with a more familiar territory, some strathspeys and reels. Kind of biggish tunes as they go. Favourites also. The first one is very old, I've come to realise, and has gone through several titles. But the one that's most familiarly known as is Delvenside. I'm not very sure what Delvenside is. And then continuing with one called Maggie Cameron, and in my mind that's always associated with one called Sandy Cameron, for obvious reasons. Maggie and Sandy, I don't know if they knew each other. And there's one other reel in this Yes, before Sandy Cameron, another reel called Miss Proud. So delve inside, Maggie Cameron, Miss Proud, and Sandy Cameron. Thank you. I've not been playing saxophone quite as much this last wee while, but I still enjoy it, and would like to play a couple of tunes on it now. Again, kind of drawing on the vast resource of tradition, and these two tunes I've chosen have the titles "The Bonnie Breast Knot," which is again an old tune and an unusual melody, which I hope you'll like. Maybe you're familiar with it. And I'll follow that with a slow rendition of a popular strathspey, the yow with the crooked horn. which has words to it and refers to a legal whisky still. Thank you. Oh, the time passes very quickly. when you're under pressure. I was going to say enjoy myself, but that's going too far. If it's okay, shall I just? It seems I've blown it now. I have to play another one. Okay. Yeah, one more quick one. I had the pleasure of making music with Alan MacDonald not so long ago, who I believe was playing in here last night, and may even still be in the building. Yeah, he suggested lots of great music. This is one of them. A tune I was trying to remember the title of this morning, and my partner Talia had a title for it. It's not the one that Alan had. But that's the way it goes with these tunes. They have different titles. My Mind Will Never Be Easy is what she knows it by. So over in Ireland they play it. They give it that title. And another one that Alan reminded me of, which I'm very fond of, which comes from my part of the world, and I'll finish with this. And thank you very much for listening. Is the melody to a song called Gin I Were with the Gàidhealans.
Thanks so much, Fraser. Thank you, Fraser. That was quite spectacular improvising. I'm very excited about the Inchcombe and Tiffinor project. That's fascinating work, taking such a historical piece of music. There has been historical research done on this document, of course, and some vocal arrangements made from it, but we haven't had a traditional instrumentalist tackle it before, so I'm very excited to see what Fraser does. Thanks, Fraser. So just to say, there is a Q&A following Joy's talk today, so you're welcome to mull over things and contribute some questions at the end. We can also take questions from our remote listeners. You can enter it into the chat and we'll check there for you. So to our talk today, No Wrong Path, a Gaelic Learning Journey, Choingheal rad cearr ann mo THURAS Gaelic. You can tell I'm only a level 2 beginner. I'm starting my homework. As the national press have suggested, Joy Dunlop is something of a one-person Gaelic industry. Gaelic singer, TV and radio presenter, Scottish step dancer, educator and event host. Joy's singing career is the result of a lifelong fascination with Scotland's traditional music and has led her all over the world, from major Celtic festivals to touring the UK, Europe, Canada, USA, China, Japan and New Zealand. Through her singing, Joy showcases Gaelic music and song in a contemporary way while also remaining true to its roots. And there's an important conversation to be had there, which of course we saw in Fraser's work as well. 5 times nominated as Gaelic Singer of the Year, she has also won both the coveted Royal National Mòd Gold Medal and the Oban Times Gold Medal, and is the only person to be crowned both Traditional Singer of the Year and Traditional Dance Champion at the Pan-Celtic Festival. She has released 3 acclaimed solo albums, a duo album with her brother Andrew, and has featured on a range of collaborative records too. A popular television and radio broadcaster, Joy is involved in a wide range of programme, including music, current affairs and light entertainment. She is increasingly in demand in television and radio broadcasts. She presents the weather on both BBC Scotland and BBC Alapa, as well as the BBC Radio Scotland Young Traditional Musician of the Year competition, and sometimes hosts well-known music programme Travelling Folk. A fluent Gaelic speaker with an honours degree in Gaelic language and culture, Joy has taught Gaelic language and song courses across the globe and is now the front person for Speak Gaelic, a multifaceted learning brand offering a comprehensive approach to learning Scottish Gaelic. In her spare time, Joy conducts the Alapa Choir, Scotland's first and only Eurovision entry, who participated in the 2019 Eurovision Choir of the Year finals in Gothenburg, Sweden. Presenting No Wrong Path, a Gaelic Learning Journey, please welcome Joy Dunlop.
Tafel Laurie, agus Fiske Bheurla. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming along. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be invited to take part in such an exciting lecture recital series. Hanni me go feichen. I don't really see you. Did you be Charlie Gaelic? Any Gaelic speakers? A wee bit. I'm actually speaking in English, so it's going to be a struggle, but we'll get through it. It is genuinely lovely to come and talk to something that's so close to my heart and just such a huge part of my everyday life as well. Agus Gaelic, what else could it be but Gaelic? I can honestly say that Gaelic is something that I use through every facet of my life, be it through my work, what I'm engaging with online, or even in my social life. But as Laurie was saying, it probably is surprising to many people to hear that I wasn't brought up a Gaelic speaker. I wasn't brought up in a Gaelic speaking household. I didn't even do Gaelic medium education. And I think it's this journey that really has created very strongly in me the idea that Gaelic is for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are or where you've come from. So I guess I really just wanted to illustrate that by telling you a wee bit more about my own personal learning journey and how I worked with someone who genuinely had not one word of Gaelic to somebody who's now the face of the most ambitious Gaelic learning framework to date. So I'm originally from a tiny wee village called Connel. Anybody ever heard of Connel? Yes, I like that. It's just 5 miles outside of Oban, and it's an English-speaking household. My mum actually originally is from Hamilton, South Lanarkshire. My dad's from Argyll. He's born and brought up in Port Appin. And my primary school was Achilleven Primary School. It was a tiny rural village primary school. We had about 24 to, when we got big, 26 pupils, and it was English speaking. And my first introduction to Gaelic was when the Royal National Mòd came to Oban when I was 9. And for those unfamiliar with the Mòd, this is a week-long competitive festival for both children and adults, and it's all about promoting, celebrating language, music, culture. And at that time, the local organising committee had used the local jungle drums, had contacted everybody they knew to encourage children in the area to take part in the Mòd if they wanted. And we were lucky in Connel. It's a tiny wee village. There's maybe 50 houses in Connel, but we had a native speaker from Islay called Mrs. Pollock, and it was always Mrs. Pollock. I have never called her Mary. She was very generous with her time, and she offered to any child in the local village, if they wanted to learn Gaelic, then they could come along to her house on a Monday after school. And she also had a full school, whether you liked it or not, choir, which was every single one of us. And interestingly, I didn't even know at that point what Gaelic was. I'd always loved to sing. I think I drove everybody bonkers at home because I sang everything. I sang along with adverts, I sang along with the radio. It was very much something I loved to do, but I never sung in Gaelic. I didn't know any Gaelic, but this was basically for us just a chance to perform. And as Achilleven was so small, it felt like it was a really easy thing to do because we could do that one-to-one. And we learned our songs phonetically. It was very much sound by sound, syllable by syllable. And I very clearly remember my first song was called Noon de Bheurla, or Across to Mull. It was about a journey crossing over to Mull. So they quite often try to pick songs for the area. And she explained to us, she gave us quite a clear mental picture what that journey was like. She would say the sounds, we would repeat them back to her. She was quite strict in some ways. She didn't let us write phonetics that she could see, but sometimes on our wee sheets we're allowed to note down maybe words in English that sounded like that to give us a steer on what we should be saying. She was a real character, and we just loved learning. I think it didn't seem in some ways like a competition. It was very much just a chance to sing. And even in the competition itself, like I didn't win. I don't think I was even anywhere near, but I just loved that idea to stand up and perform. And it gave me an opportunity to be part of something that just I didn't know anything about. I'd never felt like it was for me because I didn't even know it existed, in all honesty, at that time. And coming in as a learner, taking part in the learners' competitions, definitely gave me something that I felt like I could do. And I do know that not everybody loves competitive competitions, particularly for singing, and for some that kind of prescriptive idea that the Mòd presents of here is a song, here is how you have to sing it. There can be quite a clash there from those who have picked up songs just learning it orally. But for me, having no Gaelic background at all, that was my introduction to Gaelic song. Every single year there would be at least one song that I would learn for a competition phonetically. And there was a legacy created, particularly for that year in Oban, once the Mòd had gone, blaiadhna was created. And for anybody that hasn't heard about the Fifield movement, this is the opportunity for children to learn music, language, dance, and it was blaiadhna, or Láithreana, being Lorne, Oban and Lorne area was created. And that was on the back of the Mòd. And I think it really provided an opportunity for children in the area to try dancing, to try to sing, to try to learn music. And 30 years later, it's actually still going strong. They've just had their Fifield at Easter time there, over 150 pupils taking part. And that legacy combined with actually the Mòd legacy in Oban is really wonderful now, as there's such a strong song music culture and environment that maybe wasn't there when I was younger, because I think quite often when you're thinking of Argyll being on the mainland, it's maybe not seen as the strongest Gaelic area. Actually, it's got such a thriving music scene. Everybody plays, everybody sings at least something, and Argyll really was once a Gaelic stronghold. You'll hear locally people talking about Choingheal na Gaelic, or the cradle of Gaelic. And that was the area where Scottish Gaelic originated. It was taken across from Ireland with St Columba in the 5th century and spread throughout Argyll as he made his pilgrimage through the area up towards Iona. And that Gaelic heritage is so obvious in Argyll. You see it in the place names, you see it in the surnames, the lochs, the mountains. It's just something really special, but maybe something that got a wee bit lost over the years. But despite that, we're very proud, and we will always say that Gaelic started with us, and we'll argue anybody that says different. But I think when I was in school, what was really interesting was there were a lot of speakers, Gaelic fluent speakers in Oban in the area, most of whom had come over from the Outer Hebrides to work in Oban. But actually there weren't many young youngsters being brought up with Gaelic. There weren't Gaelic-speaking families. Of course, my family had no Gaelic, although historically on my dad's side, my nana's family had Gaelic in the family. And actually, my Grandpa Jimmy would be my dad's dad. He was a fluent Irish speaker. So only going back 2 generations, we had Irish and Scottish Gaelic in the family. But my dad didn't speak either. And we only spoke English in the home. And actually, out of the 2 of them, it was my mum, who came from Lanarkshire, who loved music. It was her that was interested in Gaelic, and it was her who started singing there first. But just to illustrate how little Gaelic that I knew, about the same time I was taught a few stock phrases, and somebody had said to me, if they say to you, "Cimara how," which means, how are you? You answer, "Hagama tapalet, cimara how hain." And well, thank you, how are you yourself? And that was learned as a phrase. I didn't know what any of the words meant. I just knew if I heard that, I knew how to answer. And I have a really clear memory of meeting a teacher from the high school, and she said to me, "Cimara how and you, Joy?" And I couldn't answer her because what I heard, Cimara how and you, was different. I didn't recognise the words there. And I was just saying nothing. And my mum, in typical fashion, whacked me and said, "You know that, Joy." But I didn't. I didn't have any understanding of what the sounds meant. And actually, I didn't start learning Gaelic properly till I went to secondary school. And at that time in Oban High School, you had to learn French and you could choose between Gaelic and German. So I chose Gaelic because I was still singing in Gaelic at that point, and I had my one stock phrase that I could learn. But even when I went into first year, I remember feeling at a disadvantage already, as in the rural areas of Argyll, you bought in peripatetic services, and quite a lot of the primary schools had bought in Gaelic, but we hadn't, and I knew nothing. And I genuinely remember it feeling very scary. I felt like I was behind. They knew what seemed like a lot, but now I realise was colours and numbers and how to say their own name. But when you know nothing, that feels like this huge journey that you still have to catch up on. It really only took probably a few weeks, a month, but it did feel like I was a wee bit behind. And luckily, I guess for me, I was doing it as a school subject. I liked school, and I had the advantage maybe of from singing. Actually, my vocabulary was pretty good, but it was on certain subjects. I was very good at love song vocabulary, the praise of the area, and maybe sailing, which is not so useful when you're in school and you're trying to talk about your normally it's who you are, who your family is, where you go on holiday. They're the subjects that you have to talk about. And about that time, they were very much looking at what you want to do as a career, and never was it ever suggested that Gaelic might even be an option. I actually wanted to do medicine. That was my plan. And I never thought that Gaelic was anything that I could do, and it wasn't encouraged in school. And I really clearly remember in my 3rd year just going into that, when you're just at that really self-conscious age, the head of modern languages hauled me up in front of the whole year because I was dropping French to carry on with my Gaelic. And he said to my whole there, this girl is ruining her life because she's not picking a modern language. I'd got the French prize and I dropped it. I think he was raging. But that was the idea. Now, Gaelic was part of the modern language department, but they still didn't see it as an option, a viable option. So it was just nothing that I thought I would ever do. And the only reason I even kept going with my Gaelic was after 5th year in school, we used to be able to take a wee bit of an easier year for 6th year. And my plan had been I was going to learn how to drive, I was going to learn how to cook and sew, so I could look after myself when I went to university. But unfortunately, we got a new head teacher in who said that everybody in 6th year had to do proper subjects. And I had worked really, really hard to get through my hires. And when actually it got to the point that I went to my first, I still remember it, first double period at 17 of my 6th year, we started a wee bit earlier. I just thought, I do not want to be here. And I was very academic, I was very studious. I never breathed out of where I should have. I followed every rule very, very well. And I remember at lunchtime, I went to the payphone in the school because nobody had a mobile then, and I phoned home and I said to my mum, I do not want to be here. There's nothing I want to do. And I was surprised because coming from, quite a strict background where you did well in school, you worked hard, you got somewhere, my mum went, well, what are you going to do then? If you're not going to be in school, you have to do something else. And it was her that suggested to me, why don't you go to Sol Marostig? And for those of you who don't know, Sol Marostig is the National Centre for Gaelic Language and Culture. It's based in Slate in the Isle of Skye. It offers both short and full-time courses. And I'm definitely not the kind of person who does something on a whim, but I left school that day. And I phoned Sol More. I phoned them. See, now I think back. And I said, I'd quite like to come and visit you. And they said, come up here, have a talk to us. And thankfully after that, they offered me a place on their immersion course, which was the Cuasa Comish, for anybody that knows it, for learners. And it was interesting because, I went up at 17. I was the youngest person in the whole place. And it was a very different learning style. When we say immersion, I mean immersion, we learned Gaelic through the medium of Gaelic. And on our first week, the first couple of days, they let us use a wee bit of English because it's actually very hard to get to know people when you only can talk about your family, where you went on holiday, and what you've been doing in school. So the first week they let us speak Gaelic, but then we had a session that they called Sorry Leisha Bheurla, or Farewell to English. And we were allowed, I still remember it, we were allowed to tell one story in English. And they said, at the end of the year, you'll be able to retell this story in Gaelic. But from now, you're agreeing that you are going to do everything through the medium of Gaelic. And I am not going to lie, this was hard at times. There was an awful lot that I remember not understanding. But for me, it really, really worked because I think it forces you to become just comfortable with not understanding things and not panicking when there are words that you don't know. And sometimes you will hear things and it might be days later that you click what's been talking about. And I remember them talking about a phone live. And in my head, I translated it as a hand phone. It was weeks later I clicked they meant a mobile. But I never thought about it in too much detail. It was just a word I picked up, and then once I knew it, I carried on. And we were lucky we had brilliant lecturers who I'm just going to mention because they helped me so much. We had Ian McPherson, who was Canadian, and Murachag MacLeod, who was a native speaker from Lewis, and they had the perfect way of teaching, I guess, grammar and syntax and pronunciation to learners whilst making it fun and not scary. And they had the patience of saints because at times we were absolutely terrible. But for me, it very much felt like a home from home. They gave me everything that I needed to work on my language skills. And I worked hard, I'm not going to lie. If you try to learn a language, it doesn't just happen easily. The more I think of it, I realise I was not maybe the most exciting of students, as after my classes, I used to go home and write out lists of prepositional pronouns. I had, which I stuck on my wall. I had the verbs, conjugations, beside my bed. And I used to pick words and then try out all the different patterns for the genitive case and just play around with them to see how it works. And I talked to myself constantly in Gaelic, which I still do. And I'm definitely slowly going mad, but it was the best way to practice and get used to the words and get used to the sounds and try things out without being scared of making a mistake. And it's funny when you start to learn, because I think people look for milestones. They want ways to assess the progress that you're making. And for me and my mum, it was, can you understand the news in Gaelic? And I don't know if anybody's ever listened to the news in a different language, but it's actually very hard. It is very specific vocabulary and it's more formal, gives a higher register. So I would be nearly hysterical on the phone going, no, I don't understand the news. And I didn't know how I would understand the news because I was still trying to put very simple sentences together. But with the immersion, it probably took me maybe four or 5 months for realising that I was listening to the news and I was absorbing the news. And actually, I did understand the news. Maybe I didn't understand every word, but I understood what we were talking about. And by the end of that year, I was absolutely functionally fluent in Gaelic. Did I make mistakes? Yes. Did I have still a lot of vocabulary to learn? Absolutely. But I could hold a conversation and I felt confident doing that. And I think by the end of my first year, I was still kind of holding on to the idea that I might go to study medicine and become a doctor. And I did actually get the most wonderful recommendation letter from Ian Macpherson to help me do that. I still kept because it was just the kindest thing that I've ever seen. And I think that's what was really special about Solmore. They looked at you individually. They gave you that time that you needed to work in everything that you could. But my heart wasn't really in it. And Solmore were also very good at just giving me opportunities on why I should stay. So at the end of my first year, they said to me, you're only 18, you're still very, very young. Why don't you do another year? And then you'll have an extra certificate and that'll help you going into university, which was great. So I decided to do that. The end of my second year, they said to me, if you do one more year, you'll have a degree and you'll only be that age. The end of my third year, they went, we now have an honours option. And you can go to Canada for 3 months, which I did and I loved. And by the end of it, I had an honours degree in Gaelic, Canon agus Culture na Gaelic, Gaelic language and culture. And some people talk about the road to Damascus moment. I think Solmore was that for me. I was so enthusiastic. It had been everything that I needed. And I wanted to use everything that I'd learned in my daily life. And there's just so many opportunities now in Gaelic. But actually back then, there were few and far between. BBC Alpha didn't launch until 2008. And this will be hard for you all to believe, but this was actually before then. I am not 20 anymore, but shh, don't tell anybody. And at the time, the 3 opportunities really had were teaching, Gaelic development work, or media, which meant radio. And the kind of general advice at that time was if you want to use your language, go into teaching, or if you're lucky, get a development job, because media can quite often be quite English language based, even if you're in a Gaelic department. And I was very enthusiastic and I thought, right, find a way to use this. I didn't think that I wanted to teach full time. And luckily for me, a job appeared within Choingheal, who are the organisation that run the Royal National Mòd, and they were looking for Gaelic development officers. And I just jumped at the chance to do something with my Gaelic. I had no idea about what being a Gaelic development officer was, which was probably a good thing in retrospect, because I also had no job description and I didn't work with anybody. I was just on my own. But I was 21, uber enthusiastic, and I just took the opportunity to work in a community in any way that I could. And in all honesty, I didn't really want to go home at that point. I'd been having a great time in Skye. No part of me wanted to go back home and feel like everybody was watching again what I was doing. But that opportunity to work with a language won over. And I worked there for 5.5 years. And in some ways, it was the best job that I ever had. It was also the most difficult job that I ever had because I had absolutely no budget. I had no co-workers, and anything that I wanted to do, I had to do totally myself. So if I wanted to run an event, not only did I have to facilitate that event, I had to advertise the event, I had to make the posters, I had to set up the chairs, had to do the tea and remember the biscuits, because if you ever forget that, well, you'll never go to an event again. I had to clean it up afterwards. I had to write up the review for the Oban Times. I mean, you did everything that needed to be done. And without realising it, it actually gave me so much practical on brand, I guess, experience. And I feel like I was quite lucky without realising it, because when you're young, you just do anything. So I worked with preschool, I worked in the school, I did conversation circles, I ran Gaelic classes, I did music and song workshops. I actually covered the whole of Argyll, and Argyll is huge. So it meant it took me from Oban all the way down to Campbellton, it took me to the Inner Hebrides. I got to do a programme on Oban FM, Ceol agus Crach with Joy, very popular in the Oban area, and that was all. But actually at that time I also had quite a lot of flexibility, and I have to say in Common Gaelic were very good at letting me just do what I wanted. And I actually took time off twice to do 2 separate Gaelic projects. Once in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. I went over there for 7 months to work with a community organisation working with Gaelic in the area. And also I went over to New Zealand as well to do the same thing for a month. And I think the wonderful thing when you're working on your own and you have to make things happen is you just believe that it will happen because you've seen it at home. And I remember when I went over to Mabu at first, they had said to me, we'd like you to do work in the schools with pupils. And I said, well, I'll just go around all the classes, I'll explain to them who I am, because they don't know me, and the work that I'd like to do. And they went, I heard them say, she'll be lucky if we get 10. She'll be lucky if we get 10. And on the first day, we had 54 people arrive. We did not have anything ready for that number, but we made it work, and it grew every single week. And actually, I think if you're willing to put the work in and you're willing to work with other people, there's so much that can be done for language and culture, and it definitely gives you very practical experience. And in some ways, you get quite confident in your abilities without really thinking about it. But I am not going to pretend that there weren't challenges as well. And I feel that I was so lucky that I met so many wonderful Gaels and people that helped me and supported me and were open to whatever I suggested. And I think it's Salmonostig. If anybody's ever been to Salmore, it's such a positive place, particularly for Gaelic. And as a learner, you are encouraged to do whatever you can. You can spend your whole day speaking Gaelic, and you're very much accepted as part of the community. And I was in Slate for 4 years. I worked in all the hotels. I went to every event going. I felt like part of that local community, and I felt very welcomed there. I did realise when I started working full-time, that is not always the case, however. And I was a learner. I came from the mainland, and I didn't come from a recognised Gaelic lineage, which meant that Gaels didn't know me. They didn't know my family, and they basically just did not rate me one bit. And they were quite open about that. You know, I was told to my face I would never be a real Gael, I would never be properly fluent, despite how much I tried, that I had no pedigree, direct quote, and that I just wasn't one of them, which was hard because that's not what I'd experienced. And I was very enthusiastic, and I was young, and I think I was looked at as quite a silly wee girl and a very over-enthusiastic little girl that they didn't understand or couldn't control. And very quickly I learned if I wanted to be accepted in this new world, which I felt very much part of, but they clearly did not see me as part of, I would have to work an awful lot harder than my native speaking counterparts. And I'd have to be so fluent and have to work so hard that it wouldn't be recognisable to the ear that I was a learner. And looking back, I think there's the ignorance of youth. I didn't realise how difficult it was. And I think now, if I was in the same situation, I don't think I'd have that resilience. But for all those that criticise me in that sort of brutally sharp way that only the Gaels have, there was actually so many more who were kind and supportive and wonderful. And I just love them to bits. And I'll always be grateful to them for all the help they gave me, because they did that off their own back and they did not have to. But after I'd done that for about 5.5 years, I did decide that I wanted to spend a wee bit more time organising my own projects and designing work for myself, maybe rather than me facilitating work for other people. And I wanted to do an awful lot more with music, so I decided to leave in Common Gaelic and go freelance, which was an interesting conversation to have with my parents, who did not understand the difference of being self-employed and unemployed. and told many people that Joy was now unemployed. And it was an interesting time because I had been doing an awful lot more singing and I really wanted to sing more professionally. I didn't do a music degree. I'd always sung since I was wee. I sung all the way through the years at the Mòd, but I decided, no, this is something I want to do a wee bit more. And I started organising my own tours and I recorded my debut album, Dh'fhiosraich, Awakening. And just the way it happened, in the same year, I won the Royal National Mòd gold medal. And for me, this was a huge achievement. If you don't know what the gold medal is, it's, I guess, the premier singing competition for Gaelic speakers. Doesn't matter if you're a native, doesn't matter if you're a learner, you're all in the same boat. And, you know, the Mòd introduced me to Gaelic. It was that competition that was, for me, the singing pinnacle. And it was no mean feat to get there. You know, when I graduated and returned to competing as an adult, again, like I was just told outright, as a learner, you will never win this. And I don't know if they meant to stop me competing, but I think you take these things two ways, and that definitely gave me the drive to prove them wrong, because I believed I could work hard enough and I could get there. And it took me, I was in the final of the gold medal 4 times. I worked really, really hard to just sing better. So, I worked on my breath control, I worked on my tone, I worked on my Gaelic pronunciation, so it was just perfect. How to express a song in a way that told the story but didn't feel too much. And genuinely, it's very un-Scottish, to admit that you're proud of anything. But for me, it was one of these things that actually winning that, I was so proud and just felt really chuffed. And I know it's lovely at home because that meant something, because they could say, we've got a gold medalist from Connel. And that was really lovely. But I also began teaching an awful lot of classes at that time. For organisations far and wide. I trained as an Òban teacher. I don't know if anybody remembers Òban, but it was a method of teaching that originally was created to bring back Hebrew, and then they tailored it to fit Welsh and then Gaelic. And for a time, this was really being celebrated as the way to learn. And I loved it. It was classroom-based, all about repetition, getting folk from the first time they're coming in the door used to listening to Gaelic, using their Gaelic. There were games. They had a sheet that they got to do, but that was at home. When we were in that classroom for that hour and a half, all we did was speak and listen and laugh. I loved the classes. You could really see that students didn't have a fear of speaking. They didn't care if they made a mistake. And if they didn't hear things properly, they'd pick it up quite quickly. Unfortunately, it's also meant that you have out with the classes that language immersion experience. You go into your community and you use it. And that was really the downfall for a lot of people, is they only had 2 classes a week and it just wasn't enough. But it was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. And I tried a lot of the different methods at that time that were being pushed for teaching Gaelic, some that I liked more than others. And there was always some interesting ways. I remember genuinely at one time a suggested lesson plan was that you taught students in Gaelic how to make a baked Alaska. I can hardly make toast. So, this was one I was definitely avoiding. But it was interesting how they were looking at how do you use Gaelic in different ways, in different environments. And I think there was definitely a lot of trial and error about that time. I also started to do more broadcasting, which I loved. And as we've talked about, my hugely professional stint on Oban FM had actually given me a lot of opportunity just to play around. I used to engineer that myself. I just used to sit there, talk, play music, and I loved it. But when I started wanting to do this a wee bit more professionally, again, this was an audience that didn't know me. I guess from the media side, the people that worked there, BBC RATHAD also started, they didn't know who I was really. And I felt like I had to go right back to the beginning again, introducing myself to these people and letting them know that actually I could do what they wanted me to do. And I basically just started saying yes to any opportunity that came, which normally involved me just talking about the most random subjects on Radio Gael. I had a theory that if they didn't have anybody that could talk about it, they would just come to me because they went, oh, Joy will do it. I spoke on National Red Apple Day. Did you know that was a thing? Neither did I. But it was actually really good though, because it made you work. And I learned the hard way. If you do not do your research, you will be live on air and not have a clue what you're talking about, which is a hard but useful lesson to learn. And it actually gave me a lot of opportunities to listen to other people, because listening when you're learning a language is the best tool you have. I listened to other broadcasters, I picked up their turns of phrases, I worked at how they asked questions, how people answered, and it was just wonderful. And particularly when I was freelancing, it was a great way to get to do wee bits here and there. And I think when you're a freelancer, you're always told that the work is going to be feast or famine, and that you have to take everything because you never know what's going to come next. And genuinely, I've never had a week yet where I haven't had work. But it's fair to also say that sometimes you have to do work that you maybe don't want to be doing, or that you have to make sacrifices. And a lot of times as a freelancer, I would be working when everybody else was on holiday. I basically had to give up my social life because my classes were either on weekends or in the evenings. I would be driving everywhere around Scotland because yes, I said I'd be in Dundee one night and the next day I was in the Borders, and after that I'd be going to Inverness. But I loved doing what I was doing. And I think as a freelancer also, again, you have to develop quite a thick skin because you're putting yourself out there and there's an awful lot of competition. And, I often interviewed for jobs I didn't get. There was some that I did, though, that were really lovely. I got to present a series on BBC Alpha about weddings, which turned out was brilliant. Or sometimes they'd go, oh, you're still singing. Do you want to come and showcase the Folk Alliance, for example, in Canada? And I got to do a lot of different things, juggling lots of different styles. And it was quite a frenetic way of working, but it really, really worked for me. For a time, at least. And I remember about 5 or 6 years ago, I did start to feel like I was in a wee bit of a rut. It's looking for that challenge. After you've been teaching for a while and you've been singing for a while and you're getting to do a wee bit more media stuff and you're juggling all the time, it does get to the point where you think, I'd like to do something new. But despite the fact the Gaelic world is quite small, you still have that idea of how do I make this happen? And I realised I could see people doing jobs that I thought I'd quite like to try, but I didn't know ever how to really get there. And what felt to me like it was a totally out of nowhere move, but looking back, it's probably because they had seen me in different roles. I actually was approached by the BBC Alpha, to cover Gaelic weather. And this was very much a freelance thing. When people were on holiday or if they were sick, can you come in and work with our weather team? Turns out I had no idea what being a weather presenter actually entailed. I thought I just sat there and read a script. I thought it was a great job, nice wee easy thing that I could do. Turns out, no. Weather presenters are the hardest working people out there. Quite often you're on your own. There are no scripts at all. The graphics that you see on the television, we make them. The things that you hear people reading out on the radio, we write them. You get lots of charts, people give you a briefing, and then you bring all the information in and you turn it into a forecast. And actually, despite the fact I actually did sciences in school because I wanted to be a doctor, I had no weather knowledge at all. So I was having to pick that up as I went. And nobody cares if you're a meteorologist or not when you're on the job. You have to do that as well as if you were one. And actually, it was a bit of a baptism of fire, but it was the perfect thing at that moment for what I needed. And it turns out I could pull from all the other skills I had picked up on the way to do that job. I always think of like a forecast as a story. Basically, you're taking information and then you're trying to tell it to people in a way that makes sense to them, which is what I'd been doing for years when I was singing, particularly singing in Gaelic. I'd been learning words and learning stories, and then I'd been putting forward that story through my voice. So that side of it was all right. From standing up at stage competing at the National Mòd, I was actually quite good at standing in front of people and performing. So put a TV camera in front of me. Turns out that was no issue. I'm actually really quick at doing stuff, which I hadn't realised. As a freelancer, time is money. You get very good at just picking stuff up and going for it. And it turns out that even though I didn't have the vocabulary for actually talking about the weather in Gaelic other than "Hi fluch," it's wet. "Hi Gàidheal," it's sunny. Actually, I love learning. So going into the archives, finding vocabulary, and from song. Song gives you so much, just such a richness of vocabulary. There was actually loads of stuff there that I could transfer over. And it just turned out to be the challenge that I needed. It was just wonderful, and I feel really lucky to still be doing it and to be able to now do it in English. Turns out I got English as well, although when I started, all I could think of were the Gaelic words, and I had to concentrate so hard to not go into Gaelic if I panicked at all when presenting in English. But it's definitely going to be one of these things that I don't think you're ever going to stop learning when you're doing a job like that, and I feel really, really lucky to be able to have done that. And I did just want to take a wee bit of time to talk about some of the opportunities that I've had because of Gaelic. You know, I'm always grateful for the places that I get to go and the people I get to meet and the things that I get to do that have very much come because of the language. That definitely would have never, ever happened if it hadn't been because I learnt Gaelic. And I'm just going to pick two. I could be here all day, but I'm also aware that Laurie's going to give me a flag if I go over my time, which could be running very short. I don't know where I started. We're just going to keep going. But I'm going to talk about the Eurovision Song Contest, and it's linked to Gaelic. Ever since I was young, I have been obsessed with Eurovision. To the level I used to make scorecards that I forced my 3 brothers to watch with me and fill in. And I don't know if anybody else was watching when Ireland introduced Riverdance to the world. Yep. I mean, I was obsessed with Riverdance, and we used to reenact that in our living room. However, I made my brother be Jean Butler, so I could be Michael Flatley, doing the moves across the living room. It was just something that, I think it's the staging, it's ridiculous, but I love it. It has singing, it's got dancing, it's got costumes, they're light. I buy into everything that they're selling. And parallel to that, you might not think they're linked, is also my love of Gaelic choirs. Gaelic choirs, if anybody didn't know, are the new rock and roll. They are, I just love it. I really enjoy singing with other people. And I think singing, you know, making music in harmony in particular with others is good for the soul. And over the years, I started off singing, well, we had our Achlev in school, primary choir, we had 1 year, and then Oban High School Gaelic choir. And then since then, I've been involved with a range of rural choirs, big choirs. I currently sing in 3 different choirs. And back in 2019, I was approached by MG Alapa, who are the broadcaster that run BBC Alapa, about the possibility of a Gaelic choir appearing in basically choral Eurovision. And the opportunity to combine my 2 favourite things, it was probably the most exciting moment of my life to date. It was only the second time they'd ever held that competition. It's actually the only second time it's ever been held. And I mean, I could probably say that we didn't have a clue how it was going to go, apart from they said to me very honestly, do you think you could create a choir that could compete against other choirs from throughout Europe in choral Eurovision? And I said, yes. I genuinely believe in my heart that we can make this happen. We were so far behind where we should have been. We had a couple of months to try and put everything together, but coming from the Gaelic choir world and with my love of Eurovision, I was like, we can do this. And actually the hardest part of the whole thing was creating the choir in the first place. They said to me, you can handpick who you want to be in your choir. And we are lucky in Scotland. We've got a really thriving Gaelic choral scene. There are wonderful choirs out there. And that gave me a pool of over 1,000 singers that I knew could do this job. But I had to pick maybe 30 to 40 of them. And it was a real challenge because I had to think, who did I think had the abilities for this particular performance? And it's fair to say that it was quite controversial at the time because there was an awful lot of people that I knew, very close friends, that I could not invite. There were an awful lot of people who felt they should have been involved in the project who weren't. But despite that, we moved that to the side, that negativity was totally ignored. And basically, we put together a choir, a collection of 34 singers from across the whole of Scotland that we just called Alapa. And I was allowed to choose what we performed. And in my heart, I wanted to do something that was different from what normal Gaelic choirs would do at the Mòd. I didn't want it to feel like a Mòd performance. I love that kind of singing. And particularly, I'd say maybe the last 5 to 10 years, Gaelic choral music has come on leaps and bounds. There's such innovative arrangements out there, but I wanted it not to feel like the Mòd. I wanted it to feel like Eurovision. And I'm lucky, as I said, I come from Connel, and there's a wonderful musician, Sheila Sinclair. She's a box player, piano player, fabulous conductor. And I said, I'd like to work with Sheila because she has an innate understanding of music and chords and just putting stuff together that sounds beautiful and moving and is respecting the tradition, but is new. And I wanted to do what I was calling Gaelic mashups. I knew that we'd only have one opportunity to grab the focus, and I wanted to showcase what we had in Gaeldom, because we've got such this array of songs in so many different types. I wanted to try and mash them together, give them as much as we could. So we put together basically 3 songs as our first performance. We had a lament called Iad Hindui, the lament for the children. We went into a traditional walking song, Mairit and Curit, and we finished off with the fabulous song from Runrig, Alapa. And we had worked that in. We had 4 minutes we were allowed. Our original arrangement was over 5, and we had to pull that down. So we had this 4-minute performance. And they also gave me the opportunity to design our outfits. You can see why this is my best job ever. And we thought, what could we wear to represent us? And I love a kilt. I am a big kilt fan. And I think it's one of these symbols that there's nothing more Scottish than a kilt. So I got the opportunity to design an Alapa tartan. They went, what colours do you like? And we went up and we put all that together. We got dresses for the women. We actually had quite an informal kilt style, which was controversial to some of the slightly more senior members of the choir, as we didn't have a sporran. I didn't know that was controversial, but apparently so. And in some ways, it was just pulling all that stuff together that was the trickiest part. But we had 3 weekend rehearsals, a lot of hard work. I was very mean, a lot of the time to them. And we headed over to Gothenburg to compete against choirs from Denmark and Germany, Latvia, Slovenia, Wales, Sweden, Switzerland, and us. And all these nations were also showing the programmes in their host nations, which meant that Gaelic song was performed to an audience for over 2 million people. And I was going to try and describe to you the performance, but I thought maybe I'll just let you watch it, if that is all right. So I'm going to subtly move this way so people in the front can see the screen. And this is our Alapa performance from Choral Eurovision.
man er ikke i tvivl om, at det her hold var fra Skotland.
In performance. Okay. And watching that, I realised they must have made me let them wear the sporrans because they were in that video there. Actually, it's interesting when you try and do anything with Gaelic, I really feel it's so important to work together to create that really strong bond, that strong community that's going to make what you're doing that so much better. And the hardest thing that we had to do there was to get very, very musical people to move in time, which is something that's never been done before. And I guess coming from the background that I'd come from, when I knew that if you put your head above the parapet, you can very easily get shot down, I was a bit worried how it would be received by Gaeldom, and I was actually pleasantly surprised that we got an awful lot of really positive feedback, and I think folk appreciated what we were trying to do. And we didn't win that competition, but that wasn't the point. The point for us was promoting and celebrating our cultural heritage, showing Gaelic to the world, and meeting the other choirs involved and learning about their culture, their music, their traditions, and appreciating what they had, but also putting our language and our culture in the same level. And whilst doing the actual official part of it, something I'll never forget, we got to sing ABBA on stage, and they had glitter cannons. I mean, this is something I am never, ever going to get to do again. But actually, in some ways, it was the informal part of it that was the most important. I mean, getting to do that, we all cried when we came off the stage. I have never seen a choir of men cry. We worked so hard to put it together, and just with the adrenaline coming off, it was special. But actually, we didn't care if we won or not. They put 3 choirs through to the final. We weren't in that final 3, and we didn't care a jot because we'd stood up there and we'd done something that was so different in Gaelic in a really beautiful, big arena in Gothenburg, and it felt very special. And actually afterwards, the 7 choirs that didn't get through to the final, we went outside to the car park and we performed our final song to each other. And that was my favourite bit of the whole night, because it was a chance for us to go, oh, this is what we would have done if we were there, and show a wee bit more about particularly our heritage. And it's fair to say the after party was one for the books. We had 53 singers in a hotel room. We don't know where half of them came from. We only had 34 in our choir. Well, they came from other choirs, but we made, I guess, quite a concerted opportunity to speak to other choirs, to find out about them. And one of the judges, Deke Shannon, who's a renowned choral leader, he actually did a video that he put out on his socials just talking about the whole event, and said there was one choir, the Scottish choir, who really understood what the competition was about. They came to make friends, they came to show what they do, and they just loved every minute, and that was the most important thing. And actually hearing that made me so proud, because our biggest challenge really was time and logistics, and we were working against other choirs that were very established. They were working all year round. They had huge teams of people who travelled with them, who watched the performances, who gave notes on their staging and their musicality, and there was just me working with our choir, and I was on stage. So we didn't have that side of things. But I think it really confirmed to me that Gaelic and Scottish traditional music can stand shoulder to shoulder with any other form of music on that global stage. There's an awful lot of work that needs to be done to get us to that level, and I think that's the infrastructure that's needed. We made that work, but actually if we'd had more support, we could have done more. We could have had even a bigger performance, a slicker, I guess, execution of it all. And it just gave a wee insight in actually the world that is out there for language and culture, and it gave us some wonderful opportunities afterwards. We also competed at the International Eisteddfod in Wales. We represented the World Choir Games in Glasgow. We were recently at the concert hall performing to a sellout audience as part of the Beat the Drum, the Runrig experience. And I guess it's that international potential of Gaelic and its speakers, and that was a choir where we had native speakers, we had learners, we had folk with no Gaelic at all, but they were there for the love of the music. And I think it just proved to me that, yeah, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter who you are, there's something there for you, and you can embody that, you can be proud of that. And I really don't feel that I can actually talk about my learning journey without talking about that community that I've created around me. And in the last couple of years, the Speak Gaelic community has really come into its own. Speak Gaelic, as Laurie said originally, is this new multifaceted learning brand, and it really does offer the most comprehensive approach to Gaelic and learning Gaelic for 30 years. You know, it's a mixture of television programmes and podcasts and learning aids and websites, all based around the European framework for modern languages. It's the first time that actually there's recognised levels for learning Gaelic. And I was actually approached to present the studio programme. So my job is basically explaining grammatical points, which I love. Pronunciation. I'm very cool. I don't know if you realised, but I'm into grammar. Pronunciation, and also chatting to our learners of the week. So whoever was in the studio, to find out about why did they learn Gaelic and what got them interested. And, you know, I've been teaching now for over 20 years, and I think that I'm very passionate about that, but I've always been very open about the fact that I am a learner. You know, I came from nothing. I watched Speaking Our Language when I was in school. I thought Rhoda McDonald was an absolute superstar. And getting the opportunity to help others learn, I was totally bowled over, but it wasn't something that I took lightly, and I knew that we would have to work really hard to produce something that was the best content possible. And I had a wonderful small team in full COVID lockdown that was trying to pull this together. But I was quite aware that there would be criticism of the fact that, you know, I'm a learner and I'm going to be leading a project to learn Gaelic. And right at the beginning, I was quite honest with MG Alapa. I made sure that they knew that there would be negative feedback for the fact that, you know, it was me presenting it. And it's fair to say that, you know, the announcement and that's I guess the feedback that we got on all different media was largely positive. But as I expected, there were rumblings, negativity about it, from two different sources, actually. I had very much expected that native speakers would go, why is she teaching people Gaelic? Because she didn't learn in the way that we learned. And I do understand that on some level. When it's a minority language in a culture, you want to preserve it, you want to make sure it's as correct as possible, you like that it's one a gloon from the knee. So I was expected that. I knew that was going to come. What I hadn't expected was the rise of what I like to call the uber learner. Those who would like the most authentic, most natural, most native source. Often people who have no Gaelic themselves, don't come from Gaelic-speaking areas, but didn't want me basically doing it. They wanted somebody that had been brought up on an island. And I've been asked quite a few times, how do you deal with that? And as a learner coming into this community, which obviously is small, is very close-knit, I think what the best thing really about Gaelic is that you've got the people and you've got the heritage and the culture, and it's all in one. So once you start learning, whether you like it or not, you're part of something bigger. So when you do get that negativity and that those roadblocks and people to your face saying, we don't want you doing this, you're not one of us, how do you deal with that? My stock answer normally is, you know, after 20 years, I've developed quite a thick skin, and I just ignore them. But if I'm being really honest, that isn't actually true. I'm a total wuss underneath it all. And every single bit of criticism that you get hurts. There's no way around that. But I definitely think I've developed a few strategies over the years. And I look at who's saying it and why they're saying it. Is there any merit, actually, in what they're saying? You know, being honest and being humble as a learner. So I know, actually, is it something I could work on? Is it something that could be changed? Even if the delivery is a bit brutal, have they got a point? You could put that in first. But then sometimes I realise that actually an awful lot of time it's about them rather than about me. And I realise that it's a very much pick your battles issue, and I can't control what other people think, what other people say. All I can do is try and be the best that I can do and give the most to a community that I feel very lucky to be part of, and the community that I've created, I guess, for myself. And if they're not part of actually my community, that's okay, because there's enough of us around there that I don't actually need that. And I do feel that the tide is shifting towards learners in general. People are an awful lot more accepting. Social media has opened up a whole new world of keyboard warriors, and it's amazing the things that folk are happy to say when they're hiding behind the anonymity of a computer screen. Just the other day, a wonderful Gaelic learner commented on a video that I'd actually just shared on my social media that was then shared in a Gaelic group. Keep Gaelic native. It was a video of me singing, and it's not the first time actually this person has commented, it's not the first time I've heard that said, and I understand that yes, in the ideal world, we would all be native speakers. We would all be learning from the knee, but unfortunately, that's not the world that we're in, and actually, we've heard the numbers for Gaelic speakers, and yes, they are going up, but we're not in the place yet where we can shun anyone. We need everybody, and everybody actually is entitled to be part of this world, and everybody should be welcomed to being part of this world. And yes, it can feel an awful lot more personal because it is small when you do get that attack, but actually you often forget about that's just one voice, and there's so much positivity out there, and most folk are decent, and they're kind, and they're welcoming, and they're enthusiastic. And if there is anybody out there that's learning, the advice that I always give is just remember why you're doing that. And it's the advice I give myself as well. Why am I doing this? It's actually nothing to do with me. It's not about me at all. It's about Gaelic, the language, the culture, the community. We are so lucky to have this really precious thing that's ours. It's only ours. It's native to us. And I think we should be promoting that, preserving it, yes, but also celebrating it and giving it to as many people as we can. And actually, I've never met anybody yet who's regretted learning the language. I've never met anybody who's regretted getting involved in the community. And whether it's something that they do as a personal project, whether it's something they do as part of their life, it brings something. And for me, that is the most important point in all of this, is what we want is to just be united as one and focus on the language, on the heritage, and on the culture. Because if we lose that, we're losing a part of us. We're losing a part of something that makes us unique. And I think we'd all be an awful lot worse off if we didn't have that. So, ach suas Gaelic. The only thing I can say is just keep going with everything. Cúm ariv. And at the end of the day, it's the language that's important. Very much not me. So, Shoma happy Abdullah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joy. We have run over a little.
So sorry.
We do. It's a sign of what a brilliant broadcaster you are. And we did invite you to talk. It's fair enough. We do have time for a few questions. And just while we get organised, I'll start with one if that's okay, and then we'll come to people in the room and anyone at home as well. Feel free to use the chat. You gave lots of inspiration for us there, and I think in some ways you're on the surface looking at your story. It might be perceived as a conventional route towards a career in Gaelic, so it was really interesting to hear your own experiences of each of those stages and some of the resistance that you experienced. You also gave some sympathy there to the kind of the overprotectiveness, perhaps, and the feelings of native speakers. What do you think are the aspects there that are on their mind that learners could be conscious of and sensitive to when engaging with Gaelic language and culture?
Yeah, I mean, I am very sympathetic because, this is a language that was marginalised. People were beaten for speaking it. And they were told it was language of the poor. You were nothing if you spoke Gaelic. And they've had to work really hard to cling on to what they've got. And it's rich and it's beautiful and it has so many subtle nuances that when you come in as a learner, you quite often don't have at the beginning. And it takes time to understand that. And learners are normally very enthusiastic. We want to use Gaelic to everybody straight away. And it's sometimes remembering that native speakers aren't teaching aids. They're not there to help you with your language. They're just trying to live their life. So I think sometimes it's being sensitive that not everybody might want to talk to you. Not everybody might want to be involved in what you are loving as your new Gaelic life. But it's maybe sort of looking for them to have a wee bit of sympathy as well, and just patience when you're very slow and you're really struggling to put a sentence together and you're trying so hard, but you're still making absolutely no sense. It's just given that time, because if you knock someone's confidence, we all know as adults, trying to do anything as an adult, learn anything is terrifying. And language is such a basic skill that suddenly you realise you can't say your own name in the new language that you're learning is really humbling. So I am sympathetic, absolutely, but I also don't think that holding on so tightly to a language and a culture that you're not letting anybody else in doesn't help. I just don't think it helps. I don't think it's healthy. And there's got to be a wee bit of give and take. And you can, I still have people who, advise me on things. And I love that. They do it in such a generous way. And I have to say, Ian Urucherson, if anybody's ever watched Speak Gaelic, the wonderful John Urquhart, who I just adore, is great. And sometimes he'll go, oh, just, you know what you said there? Actually, I heard from my grandparents something different, and he does it. He's never done it in a negative way. And there are so many people like him, Marichuch MacLodge, my first year uni lecturer, who I still ask questions to, just to check if I'm right. And there are that openness to helping and informing and directing, I think is just what we need. And we've all got to have a bit of humility at times, but also just, be kind to each other. It's hard enough out there.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the audience. I think we have one here in the second row.
Yeah.
Joy has moderated the New York Caledonian Club, New York Tartan Week Mòd for the past few years. What have you seen as far as progress in our little event that we've had over the past few years that gives you hope?
Yeah, so
Joy, if you could repeat the question.
yeah, I will do. For the last 3 years, I've been lucky enough to be moderating the New York City Tartan Week Mòd, and it's only been running for 3 years. We originally created it and actually filmed the whole process for a BBC Alapa documentary, and in our first year, we had 10 performers, 9 of whom were American, 1 Scottish person in there, and it was very much a let's see what happens here. We provided some guidance for the competitors, and we understood that out with Scotland, where you maybe don't have people coming from Gaelic backgrounds at all, they've maybe never done anything before, that this might be their first, not just performing opportunity, but experience of Gaelic. We wanted to make it really positive, really supportive. And the first year, it was just lovely. People were wonderful. And it felt very warm, but it was new. So you're trying to iron out the issues. And what I've really liked is every year the confidence has grown of the competitors, and maybe also the Tartan Week community, which is it's a very much a thing in itself. And when you come in, you're still trying to work out who everybody else is. I think we've been then welcomed by the wider community, which is lovely. I loved it this year when I went over. You felt like you were seeing old friends again, and that felt really special. And then this was our 3rd year this year, and we had, for the first time ever, a Gaelic choir from Scotland came over, and we had a youth choir from Shanghai. And these were pupils who were in an international school. They spoke, they were Chinese and had no Gaelic at all, but had learnt a song. They had a pipe band in their school and thought if they were coming over to Tartan Week anyway, why not learn a Gaelic song? And there was this one girl who stood up and she led a walking song. It was actually the one from the video, the middle song that we showed there. And she stood with such confidence and she sang a Gaelic song, and our pronunciation was brilliant. And that just, it gave me such hope, and it just made me so happy, because I looked around and I thought, look at our audience. We're the biggest we've ever been. It felt like it was the most positive it's ever been, and there was people there from everywhere. And yes, there was native speakers. We had some from Lewis who brought up with Gaelic as their first language, but we also had people who had not a word, and they were just as welcome. And that has been my ethos from the beginning coming in. I said, I want to make people feel welcome. And I like the fact that there are some people who've never performed before. We actually had some Scottish people who'd never performed before, but they went, we're in New York. If you can't sing in New York, when can you sing? And they found it a really positive experience. And for me, that's what I've loved, is how it's grown and how it's going to continue to grow. But it's getting that, the support and the openness and the warmth. And I hope that's something that we can see more. Because, as I said, for me, competition has never been a bad thing. I've always found it was a really good way to make myself improve and tighten up on all the wee bits. But actually, you want, at the end of the day, to enjoy it. And that's what makes people come back. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, third row.
I'm also going to ask you any questions. I was going to come up and say hello to you. Hello, Joy. Long time no see.
Hello!
Is
Va, va, va. Kind of immersion.
I'm the Bheurla, Earra Gàidheal,
Ah.
So I am now holding the torch for Gaelic. Right. I'm a learner a few years, and I teach at Gillespie's, and I'm a Ginny, and I teach through the medium of English as well, so music and drama and media. And I feel like I need a mentor to help me through this huge job, you know, because we have Gaelic here in Edinburgh, schooling, and just one boom school at the moment. We don't have, you know, the wide feed in, and it does feel like a massive job, you know, picking the songs and then having to teach them, and also, you know, trying to, I suppose, not convince young people that this is a great thing to do, and it is a challenge, you know, to get, you know, with 92, I think we have in Gillespie's other kind of clubs and things to compete against.
Yeah.
To say, look, come and join my Gaelic choir, this is great, and you know, find the arrangements, and even finding the music and the parts to suit, you know, and it's usually girls who would come, and the boys might come and play. That's very, very hard to shift that into something amazing. And it is like you're on your own.
Yeah.
Seriously, you are on your own, and you can get a bit of help here and a bit of help there, and it just feels like, wouldn't it be lovely to have this kind of pool of support that doesn't always feel very strong and connected. I know we're trying in Edinburgh to have a centre for Gaelic, and you know, but it would be, you know, any thoughts there? You know, I feel like I do need that sort of inspiration and the energy you've got. You know, I've got the energy, but I don't think it's remotely near yours.
Oh, not at
So
all.
just quickly for folk at home, that's a learner who's embedded in the community, involved in Gaelic activity and regeneration, and supporting other learners, and the feeling of isolation and the real need for mentors to connect everyone.
It is hard, like minority language, anything is hard because, you know, the clue's in the name minority. I think sometimes don't be shy. We can be very polite. You never want to ask for help. And actually, I've found anybody I've ever asked to do something will. You know, speak to Common Gaelach, ask them if they've got any help. Fifield and Gael are doing wonderful work as well. Bheurla Gaelic can give you financial support. But go, who's doing what? Just ask. And then I just often say to people, do you know anybody that can help me with this? Because, for example, you are so much better to have somebody that's in Edinburgh, because that's local to you and they can pop in and help you when need be. And there's a native speaker in the community who's could be retired, got a bit more time on their hands, would love to come in and work with the younger ones. Trying to convince anybody that Gaelic is cool can be tricky, particularly Gaelic medium, because it's school for them. So sometimes it's doing trips or getting an exciting person in to talk to them that's not their teacher in the politest way, because if you've got them every day, it's really hard. And it's just trying anything. And I think the nice thing is there's an audience here, and you'll probably see Patricia there in the orange. If you would like to help, just go find her. She's there. But it is sometimes not being shy and going, we'd like to do more of this. Can you link up with the Chief and Bheon Céilís? Can you have a look at anybody that might be teaching at the Phage, or going, who is here, and just emotionally blackmailing them into helping you? Because I find that is the most useful, really. And there's loads of stuff online. So if you're looking for even things like arrangements, I've got a pile of arrangements, but I still just ask. We've got a wee group for Gaelic choirs, conductors, and I'm just like, anybody got a good arrangement, or anybody look at who's competing at the Mòd, ask them. We've all got massive piles I've got mine are alphabetized because, again, I am cool, but like we've got them in our back catalogue, so don't be afraid to ask.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry, my question or statement, first of all, that was wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Your
my explained enough, our granddaughter goes to Gillespie's, and she's done Gaelic since she was 5 years old. And last year she did her Nat 5, and she's done very well throughout, but she has given it up.
Oh.
And that is where, you know, it's trying to get back into me and trying to
Yeah.
encourage her, as it were, because we're not.
And it's sort of age-appropriate things as well. So I don't know if she ever did the J-Spit, the high school debate competition. Sometimes it's the extracurricular things. They do, yeah. It's worth having a look at how you can get them involved with other schools or other choirs or other groups, so it doesn't feel like a school subject. If it gives you any hope, recently I ended up in Malone's in Glasgow, which is a pub that's open till 3 a.m. And I would have said 20 years older than everybody else that was in there, which was only slightly traumatizing to realise. But 5 times that night, ones I would have said, teenagers, maybe like 18, 19, came up to talk to me in Gaelic. I didn't know them at all, but they just came to say hello in Gaelic. And after that, I was like, there is hope. We are doing something right. Because that was in a social setting. They did not need to go anywhere near me. I was there with the choir, actually, after performance, and they made the effort to come, and they spoke to me in Gaelic. So I think she might come back. It's finding like the wee niche or the friends that are doing it, or have a look if she's going to uni. They've got a lot of these taigh Gaelic, like the schemes for staying in a Gaelic flat, and they don't have to pay. They can just, there's ways and means, but you sort of have to. It's a wee bit of like enticing them back in and making it, finding the hook, and then going with that and just make it accessible in that way.
Any others? Conscious of time, of course, and I'm aware that we haven't managed to fit in a song yet.
I had great plans, and then I started talking and it went horribly wrong.
How do you feel about giving us a song?
Would you like a song?
We love a song.
I'll just give you actually one of my favourite songs. I have a theory that sometimes the sadder songs in Gaelic, the more beautiful they are, and the ones that have a good story behind them. So, Choingheal, dh'aois. This is a song from Mackay country, right in the north of Scotland, an area that was greatly affected by the clearances. And it's a beautiful song with the most gorgeous melody. They actually took the melody for the song, smoothed it out, and used it for the theme tune to the film The Piano, if anybody's ever seen that. But actually, it's a song of anger about how he's cursing, the bard is cursing the sheep that have been put in place of people. And he's just describing how the communities were decimated. They took away the people, and it was the Duke and the Duchess of Sutherland and Patrick Saylor he's given it to them both barrels in this song. But I just think it's the most beautiful one, and I'm going to give you a shortened version because it has lots of verses. But this is just a wee snip of it. Choingheal, dh'aois. O fallach geikle kurig vod, catch vil clown on dunje koth, yal the grum der famiok, mesrate wich kein la fasach. Ha tri fiket blianse tri, o gak mi du ich wichkei. Catch vil gillian og machri, snadina kan choboyach. Hiller haun ish not the way, good nam bound trach la doch wash. Amelia crying with and twag randere nach duet gloria. Hiet you hatte let goed fail, slet goed karshash don a gail. Gum bound and you and fat o heil, gum beard you this love youth. Van you hatte filuati, catch vil dagen shan sheet, and doch me du van eins van Harry, Juan miscan and clarif, mo fawach geik la curig for. Catch vir clown ben je calf, yelly grim ner famiak, masrate ich kei la fasach.
That was beautiful. Thanks, Joy. We're going to wrap things up here. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, for Rebellious Truth 2025. Special thanks to our speaker, of course, Joy Dunlop. Many thanks to Edinburgh Trad Fest and the festival team, especially its captains, Jane-Anne and Douglas. To the crew here, Craig Gaskin, Sandy Butler, and everyone at the Traverse Theatre. Thanks to Celtic and Scottish Studies at the University of Edinburgh and the festival sponsor, the William Grant Foundation. So I hope that you will continue to enjoy the music at the festival, to continue with your Gaelic learning and to get involved if you're not already. I think Joy would like to finish with some step dancing.
I hardly get the chance to dance anymore. And Laurie is such a wonderful fiddler. We're just gonna give you a wee step or two. If anybody wants to come up and join us, you're more than welcome. Lovely.